AM 1450, FM 103.3, KNSI, Ox in the afternoon. State Senator Dave Osmek sitting in for Ox. And I thought we would finish our afternoon of heretics as we've been talking to all of them today. We had Congress, we had a congressman, we had two projected state senators, and now we will talk to the, how do we call him? The elder statesman of the heretics in the state Senate. St. Cloud State graduate and state senator Warren Limmer. Warren.
Yes, I'm now on the list of chief heretic. You saved the best for last, I suppose.
Yes, age before beauty. But Senator Limmer sits behind me in the state senate, and
someone's got to keep an eye on you.
You do, and also I also reprimand you from time to time to make sure when you are doing the Pledge of Allegiance that you make sure you punch up your justice.
Justice, yes.
So
crack into the word.
Exactly. So want to have you on. You are the lead Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee, also known as the Dark Sith Lord Latz's Committee. And there's a couple things that have been going in front of that committee, and more importantly, one of the committees that you've been working on during the interim, as we call it, is on Real ID in Minnesota. Would you like to talk about where we are with that and where we're going?
Well, let me give you a brief history real quick. 2005, Congress passed the Real ID bill. It really wasn't a bill. It was an amendment that was added to the Afghanistan military appropriations bill.
Sort of funny how we do things.
Absolutely had to pass.
Yeah, it's sort of funny how we do things in the dead of night without any discussion.
Yeah, 2:30 in the morning that came up, and it was mysteriously put into a must-pass bill with no roll call vote.
Funny how that happens. Sort of like a certain Senate building that got built in St. Paul. Sort of like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's exactly like that. I suppose congressmen learn it in their earlier days from when they're in their legislative seats.
Yes.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. But nevertheless, it was passed, and it put some wheels in motion that we're just beginning to realize now, 11 years later. What it was is a requirement to create what I call is equivalent to a national ID card that's going to have it's made out of plastic with some chips in it, and printed on the outside will be your driver's license. It'll look and feel like a driver's license, but it has a whole lot more technological power to it than what our simple Minnesota driver licenses have now.
Right. It has to do with a lot of data collection concerns that we have and privacy concerns in Minnesota.
We're very concerned. Minnesota, for as much as I love to be a critic of Minnesota state government, Minnesota has really led the country in a lot of different areas around data privacy for its citizens. But this card is going to change all that because any government bureaucrat in any of the 50 states will be able to tap into another state's records. So Minnesota will no longer have that safe, secure privacy protection. Anyone outside of the state can do that. The other thing that we kind of forget about is once data leaves the borders of our state, we cannot enforce our laws on data protection for our citizens.
So the legislature, in its infinite wisdom, and this time I'm actually probably saying that with all honesty, decided in the last decade that we were going to not necessarily opt out, but we were going to put a law in place that said we're not going to talk about this.
Well, not only that, we prohibited Minnesota from participating in the Real ID Act. Back in 2009, I carried the bill, and it was a bipartisan bill. It was passed with 200 of 201 total legislators in support of it, and we joined 32 other states saying absolutely not to the federal government. 200
out of 201 that never happens around there. We can't agree upon what time of day it is.
When we say no to the federal government.
Right.
No, there's a lot of fans of big government in the state legislature.
Well, now the guys in Washington are now saying that we're going to either have to or else.
Yeah, either we get in line with the program or they will impose limits on our air travel for every citizen in the state of Minnesota unless you have a Real ID compliant identification card, or you could use a U.S. passport.
Right.
For domestic travel, no less.
Right, as well as limit your access onto any military bases. That's another
military
thing.
bases, you can't, most people don't travel and visit nuclear power plants. But,
not always, not every day.
Restricted.
So where are we at with that? I believe it went through transportation. I think it is with your committee.
It went through transportation. It started there. It went through judiciary. It's awaiting. I think we even passed it on the House floor, the first version of it. Now, there's a little caveat that listeners have to know about. When we passed that prohibition, I figured that this would come up and haunt us sometime in the future. So we added a little provision that said even state government administrators, department heads, agency commissioners cannot even discuss that without getting a pass from the legislature.
Right.
Now, a lot of people, they were rather critical. What in the world are you doing? The eyes roll. But this bill was so important to the legislators in 2009 that we decided if we do reconsider it, it's not going to get passed off through a government agency and mysteriously turn into law without the public knowing about it. We made sure that in order for the departments to even give us information on how to do it and how much is it going to cost, we had to get the approval from the legislature first because they're the ones accountable to the public on making a decision to open that door on their privacy.
Well, the good news is that we still have time. As the guys in Washington were rattling the Stabers, they finally backed off a little bit and have given us given a little bit more time for us to be compliant. And I think
they extended us an extension. Every state in the country is extended to 2018, which is kind of curious because it's 1 year past the Obama administration leaving office.
Funny how that works, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, the court, or what I'm seeing right now, and I serve on the Transportation Public Safety Committee, and I've been involved in those interim meetings, is we're looking at maybe doing a dual path, I guess, is that one, you will be able to purchase a compliant ID, but you're going to have to pay more. But you can, if you choose,
Wisconsin,
you don't have to.
In Wisconsin, they set it up that way. They gave their citizens a choice. Either get the nice, slick, streamlined, high-tech, high-power driver license that can get you just by that mere card. It can get you onto military bases in visitor areas, or you could use it to get on board airplanes. But the trade-off is this is a high-power technical gizmo that's going to be able to collect a whole lot more data on you than you ever believed. And the problem with it is when the bill was passed originally by the U.S. Congress, they gave a unilateral power to whoever the Homeland Security Director will be in the future. That individual can expand the scope and the function of the Real ID card anytime he or she deems appropriate in the future. What that really means is Congress is out of it. Your representative representing your voice in Congress will no longer have a say in that expansion of that card. It's very important to get that power back in the hands of our representative government.
Absolutely. I'm speaking with Senator Warren Limmer, St. Cloud State University graduate and state senator with me in the Minnesota State Senate. One other topic I wanted to touch on is are those friends in the other body, we're not allowed to use the H word. The other body had a meeting, a recent meeting, to talk about getting some additional bed space and reopening the private prison facility in Appleton. And it was rather interesting, the reaction that some of the members of the public went off on. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, a few years ago, the Minnesota legislature decided to experiment with an idea called privatization, bring private sector in to run some of our basic functions. And one of those options is to invite private companies to run a prison cheaper than what it is being offered under the public sector. The Appleton prison was created by an organization called the Corrections Corporation of America, CCA. They put it out in Appleton. It's a rather large facility. It's sitting dormant right now because our last few years of Department of Corrections refuses to send anyone out there. So it's kind of mothballed, but it's almost like a brand new facility. And they had a hearing in the Senate. There seems to be a lot of people that just want to forbid us for ever using that in the future, a perfectly good prison, while
it's built.
The very same people in charge of the Senate is saying that we have runaway population for prisons.
Yeah.
They'd rather build one at the expense of $1 billion or more to the public in order to preserve the public sector from keeping those jobs.
Or the people, my understanding, the people in the hearing in the House, actually, people were screaming at the committee saying, well, just don't lock people up.
Yeah, we've gotten, our whole society is saying what good is bad and what bad is good. It's just amazing to see the age that we're living in, and it seems like mob rule is dictating legislation to Minnesota office holders. It was quite a scene in the Minnesota House Committee when they were trying to bring up a bill that would authorize the use for surplus population in our prisons to temporarily be used, manned by union workers. Our Department of Corrections employees would man it, and you'd think that someone was taking someone's firstborn children. Mob scene comes in and starts screaming and yelling at the author of the bill just because he wanted to save some money for the taxpayers and use a perfectly good prison and man it with government employees, government correction officers, so we could take that surplus population and take care of it rather than build something brand new.
Oh, well, obviously someone needs to make some money. We need to build some more prisons because somebody makes money off of that, I guess.
Well, it's, we all, as good policymakers, we really would hope that people would change their wicked ways and start learning to behave in a civilized society. But it seems like even the civilized members of certain communities in Minnesota turn it into a yell fest, and I suppose they pick it up on other communities in Twin Cities. You see it in the news all the time. You see it on national news. If you want change, just create a mob and have a near riot in order to dictate public policy across the states, and it's happening right here in Minnesota now.
Well, and it's funny how, when we see this happening at the Capitol, it's always people that are supporting the liberal Metropolitan Democrat institutions, it be it the union daycare worker unionization effort. And if you remember that one, Senator, look at what happened with the vote. It was a resounding defeat for the unionization, and they spent all that time and all that money trying to ram something down the daycare workers' throats that they didn't want.
There's two premises that are a major foundation to the American labor movement, and it's upheld by case law, and it's also part of a statute. Any worker has a right to organize, and they also have a right to pick the union that they wish, and you do it through an election. But a year ago, when it was dictated by the governor of Minnesota that individual daycare providers, these are the moms that have a little daycare in the basement of their house, they were told that they had to unionize. And they were actually not necessarily an employee. They owned the business out of their own home. So that you don't have the traditional workers versus management tension that goes on, but state government, through an edict from the governor, was going to dictate to a little homeowner, usually either a single mom or a mom who, along with her husband, had a little daycare in their home, and they were going to dictate to that person that they had to become union members. Unbelievable overreach by the governor as well as state government.
And it turned into a steaming failure. So
well, that deal, I submitted the bill to bring it to the court as an action of the Minnesota Senate, and we finally were vindicated by it all.
Well, thanks for calling and spending a few minutes with me, Senator Limmer. You are next on my car washing duties as a freshman. We all know I have to do the car washing duties. So,
well, it's vitally important. Make sure our people keep an eye on what's going on in St. Paul and in Washington.
Absolutely.
Be involved.
But thanks you so much. I will see you tomorrow on the Senate floor.
You bet. I'll be watching.
Yep. Thanks, Senator Limmer. Appreciate him calling in. And we will be right back. This is AM 1450, FM 1033 KNSI. This is Ox in the Afternoon. Senator Dave Osmek. Be right back in just a second.